Number 10. Artie. Arthur Artie Maddox is an interesting one. His mutant abilities manifested when he was just 11 years old, leaving him disfigured and mute, but granting him the very interesting ability of visual telepathy. This means that Artie can connect to his or others' thoughts, and he can project those thoughts as psionic holograms or pictograms. This is really useful for Artie, specifically as he is a mute, but at the same time, I gotta say I think that regular telepathy would kind of be a bit more useful, and I don't know. Doesn't matter, because Artie's power is more cool, because he can even make large-scale holograms and use them in battle, usually for defense. But Artie can also perform something called a mind lock that allows him to paralyze someone physically or mentally. I kinda hope he keeps evolving his powers, but we'll see. Number 9. I Scream. I Scream, that's I, like this, or Scream, like is a villain of the X-Men who decided he needed to destroy the X-Men using their danger room. He actually got pretty far in that plan too, and he was able to overload Cerebro, taking down Professor X temporarily. Now I'm going to assume he did that by giving the device a brain freeze, because if you hadn't guessed, Ice Scream can turn into any flavor of ice cream, and then everyone screams for Ice Scream's ice cream. No, that's not true, sorry. But using his abilities, he was able to enter the X-Men's mansion and the danger room before Xavier came back too and lowered the temperature in there, freezing Ice Scream's ice cream form, which is when a clown turned him into a banana split and split from the scene. Just go read Anoxio the Clown from 1983, you'll get it. Make sure you guys check out the other videos in this series and drop a like on this video to show us your support. Number 8. Peeper. Peeper, or Peter Quinn, first appeared in Captain America Annual number 4 in May 1977 as part of Magneto's new Brotherhood, a brotherhood of verbally based villains: Slither, Shocker, Lifter, Burner, and Peeper. Seems like a bit of lazy writing over at Marvel to me, but this group actually went under a couple different names under a couple different leaders, including Mandrill and the Red Skull. Peeper though is definitely the most interesting of the bunch, and he's also more relevant as he has appeared recently as part of Abigail Brand's sub-team called the Six. On this team, Peeper played the role of the Eye, using his abilities to examine Chiron or Kerbon particles. That's because Peeper has the gift of telescopic, microscopic, and X-ray vision using his enlarged eyes, but he also had an offensive ability in the form of yellow or red concussive optic blasts. He also seems like a decent dude, despite usually being a villain. Number 7. Brew. Saying that a mutant is unique kind of feels redundant, as most mutants have pretty unique abilities from others of their kind, but Brew is even more unique as he is not a mutant of the human race. Instead, Brew is a mutant of the incredibly violent and parasitic insectoid alien race known as the Brood. This essentially means he can actually feel compassion and friendship, and he was born separately from the Brood hive mind, meaning he is not loyal to a Brood queen. He also possesses super genius levels of intelligence, making him one of the smartest students at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning. So, Brew's X gene mutation is only really mental or psychological in nature, but being a Brood, he brings natural body armor and fanged jaws to a fight, and recently, Brew actually consumed a king egg, making him king of the entire Brood species, including the Brood queens. Number 6. Big Bertha. Bertha Crawford, originally Ashley Crawford until she changed her name, had the mutant ability of total control over her body's physical size and mass. She can add or take away hundreds of pounds to herself at will, controlling her figure. This allowed her to become the highest paid fashion model in America at one point, but also allowed her to don the Big Bertha superhero persona. Using her abilities to add bulk and mass, she actually increases her durability and her strength to a peak of lifting 50 tons, allowing her to jump huge distances like the Hulk. No matter what size Bertha alters herself to though, she has a high level of athleticism. Ashley rebranded herself into a plus size model, which is when she changed her name to Bertha, and you know what? She still kinda killed it. Good job.
Number 5. Lactuca the Knower. Making their first appearance in Planet Size X-Men, yesterday. How lovely. Lactuca was a member of the Great Ring of Araco. Now their power could come in handy around the house. They simply know the location of everything. And yes, including that one shirt that you still can't find. Where is it? Maybe the cottage? Maybe it's at the cottage. They helped out Marvel Girl and Exodus actually when they had to move the entire island of Araco to Mars. Yeah, that's quite the move. All hands on deck. They're an Omega level mutant with extreme spatial awareness, but it's still unknown if that means the universe that they're in, or if that also includes the multiverse. We're still trying to figure that out in comics. Either way, there's room on this list for that new mutant. Number 4, Maddie, aka The Weapon. Good nickname. Maddie made her first debut in Deadpool vs. Old Man Logan issue 1. She was a mutant who started to steal others' belongings in school. Now she didn't mean to by any means, but they would just kind of teleport to her all of a sudden. Then one day when she was missing her father, he was working far away, she hadn't seen him in about a year, she accidentally teleported him to her. What a pleasant surprise. He was like mid-shovel too. Only thing was, this does a lot of damage to a human being, so they don't often survive this cosmic commute. So now she was detected by Cerebro, so Logan investigated what was going on. And that's when she ran into Wade, who also joined in on the fun. Now in actuality, Maddie wanted to be captured by Genform so that she herself could understand her powers more. But then when Genform abducted her and did experiments, she was then forced to teleport these massive vehicles and structures over Deadpool in order to crush him. Now the way Maddie helped him out was pretty cool, I gotta admit. She teleported Wolverine's claws into Wade's fists, and then he dug his way out. And yes, in case you were wondering, the claws were returned afterwards. Maddie took care of Genform's leader, Agent Hart, 2 months later herself. We love revenge. Nice. Number 3, Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious sounds like a Harry Potter spell. Decimus Furious made his first debut in Uncanny X-Force issue 1. He was born in Rome. Both of his parents sadly passed away when he was really young, so he had no choice but to live in the streets. So then around 281 AD, yeah, this was a little while ago, that's when his powers emerged. He started to attack people randomly until he was eventually locked up. He didn't really know what was going on. But it also didn't take long for his skills to be used in the Colosseum as a gladiator. He fought every day for his life for a few years, with freedom being that glorious prize that he's always chasing after. He was soon worshipped as the dark god Minotaur, so yeah, he was kind of killing it. He was picked as Apocalypse's final horseman, the horseman of war, of course, and he fought Deadpool, and then soon he fought the entire X-Force. This guy was a unit. He had war-filled psyche, so if you try and read his mind, it will backfire, and then you'll be overthrown with sorrow and hate. Plus, you don't want to get too close to this guy anyways, because one hit from his axe, and you'll soon have the cold thirst for war, just attacking people around you for no reason. Number 2, Iska. Iska the Unbeaten, there's a name for you. She made her first debut in X-Men Volume 5 issue 12 just last year, so also quite new. Iska was one of the many who lived on Okara. Now when her sister, Genesis, had 4 children, Iska forged the Scarab to celebrate, which was his epic sword divided into 4 parts. She gave it to her brother, Apocalypse, brother by marriage. Very important to say, brother by marriage, not blood brother. Now the Scarab was a symbol of the Genesis line of Okara, and when the mutants went to battle with the Amenthi Daemons, Iska betrayed her kind and then joined Annihilation's army. Traitor. I mean, well, her power is literally to not lose, so it made sense. Yeah, so she obtains what's called psychokinesis, so never play poker with her, because you'll lose. Because she can't lose. She literally can't lose. One-on-one, battles, dance-offs, you name it, she'll win them all. Probability is manipulated in her favor, and on top of that, she can also shapeshift if need be. Like when she joined Annihilation, her body was then covered in all these occult symbols. And then when she's aligned with the X-Men, her skin turns from red to gold. How neat. Number 1, Gabriel Shepherd. Making his debut in X-Men Volume 3, issue 36, Gabriel Shepherd was the last of the proto-mutants. That's when the X-gene was first evolved. So that was like 700 years ago, and luckily he was the most powerful and average looking, so he took on new identities, always moved about, he played it safe. He was blending in as a human, until the X-Men tracked him down to ask him about all these proto-mutants. But Gabriel's powers were already in play here. See, he read their minds, and then learned that the other proto-mutants had been resurrected to be used just as a weapon. But they didn't say any of that in the pitch. So he got upset and attacked. Then Pixie sent him to a timeout in Antarctica. And then after he cooled down, pun intended. He had a conversation with Pixie about the past and then decided to never let proto-mutants be used again, including himself. And then he turned himself into pure energy. What a way to go.
Moving on to number 10 with Marrow. Of all the mutant powers out there, I think the one I would actively try to avoid having, if that was how it works, is the abilities of Marrow. Now Marrow's actual mutant ability is a hyper-accelerated metabolism, and it's through this that she's able to do what most people know her for: accelerated bone growth. She has the ability to control the growth, shape, and toughness of her bone structure, even having it protrude from her body and be used as weapons that she can remove. She can also use this ability to create a sort of armor. Now the only problem, and the reason I wouldn't want it, is that it hurts when she does it, and just imagine how much that would hurt, having your bones protrude from your body. No thank you, I'll pass. Luckily, she has a very rapid healing factor that also gives her enhanced strength, agility, and reflexes, and as a little bonus, this girl has 2 hearts, which allowed her to actually survive when she had one pulled out. Nice. Number 9, Eunice the Untouchable. Now, I gotta say the force field abilities of wrestler, criminal, and villain Eunice the Untouchable definitely have some major drawbacks. The positives are great. His force field can withstand blows from the Incredible Hulk. He can project his force field to move objects. He could also use the shield to be untouchable, hence the name, opening it up to be able to grab things and eat. Now, the drawback would come in the fact that there have been multiple times where Eunice had his abilities increased, but to a point he couldn't even control his own abilities. At this time, his shield would literally close him off from everything. He couldn't grab things, eat food, or even breathe oxygen, which caused him to even pass out on one occasion, which luckily deactivated his powers, allowing him to actually live. Maybe if he used his powers for good, the writers would make him less self-destructive, but these are the cards you're dealt, bro. Guys, if you are indeed enjoying this video, do make sure to give it a little thumbs up. It's all you gotta do to let us know that you're enjoying what you're seeing. Thanks, nerds. Appreciate you. And at number 8 is Pyro. St. John Allardyce is an Australian pyrokinetic mutant. He has the ability to control flame to grow in size and intensity, and to even take on any form he desires. He has used flame to create almost solid creations he refers to as, quote, the living flame, which have been in the shape of gigantic claws, birds, or even golems. The size, power, and intensity of the fire beings Pyro created were limited only by the extent of his imagination, the degree of his concentration, and his force of will. The only problem for Pyro is that he cannot generate flames spontaneously. He needs a source, which has been flamethrowers in his costume, other allies like Lockheed, or like a lighter or something. He could also be burnt by any fire that wasn't under his direct control. Now, he used his abilities mainly for evil deeds and crimes, but since his resurrection on Krakoa after he died due to the legacy virus, he has gone on to join Kate Pryde's Marauders and got this crazy skull tattoo on his face. It's kind of cool, but also I wouldn't do it, but you know, whatever. Number 7, Strife. You know, a lot of the characters on these lists have come into contact with the character of Strife. And while most people do know how powerful Strife is, I think not including him on this far into this series is kind of a sin. So, Strife is actually a clone, created by Mother Ascani and taken by Apocalypse, a clone of Nathan Summers, whom most of you know as Cable. Strife is essentially what Cable could have been had he not been infected by the techno-organic virus that he needs to use his powers to constantly keep at bay. Without that limitation, just like Cable, Strife is an Omega-level telekinetic, at least that's what he calls himself, and it's stated that he is the 3rd most powerful one on Earth. He is able to do almost all of the other things telepaths of his level are capable of, plus powerful defensive and offensive telekinetic powers. But he is also cybernetically enhanced to have superhuman physical attributes thanks to Apocalypse. Strife is an incredibly powerful villain, not to be taken lightly at all. And at number 6 is Reaper. Pantu Hurageb has some interesting abilities to say the least. When he first appeared as part of Strife's Mutant Liberation Front, Reaper had the ability to generate a paralyzing effect on others that slowed their mobility and reaction times. He would usually use his scythe as a conduit for this ability, and it could even fully paralyze victims. But later, Reaper was enhanced by the Weapon X program, who gave him cybernetic prosthetic arms that could take different shapes, although you likely won't be surprised to hear they usually took the form of scythes that would still act as a conduit for his abilities. Unfortunately, Reaper did lose his abilities on M-Day, only to regain them again and then have them drained again. So he doesn't have any powers right now, I'm pretty sure. Or they're like diluted or something, I don't know.
Number 5, Archangel. Warren's wings are pretty amazing as is, but during the X-Force storyline, he got the upgrade of a lifetime. He got techno-organic wings by Apocalypse after he became the Horseman of Death. The old HOD. Sometimes they work. I thought he was powerful before, but this is just another level. His feathers were much stronger this time around as the Horseman, and he could fire them off like bullets. They could pierce right through steel, or he could use the wings to smash and fly through anything. Either or. The techno-organic wings regrew afterwards for a second time, along with the new blue skin tone to match Apocalypse. Now this form of Angel is hard to keep away. He often struggles to keep his heroic side in control. If Apocalypse made me a Horseman of Death and I got all that extra power, I'd be pretty annoyed having it taken away every now and then. I get it. Number 4, Nathaniel Gray. This mutant is from an alternate reality, like some of our other ones that we talk about. He styles himself as a mutant shaman, loaded with precognition, telepathy, telekinesis. Who is he? Let's talk about him. Coming from Earth 295, artificially created from Sinister and the High Lord Apocalypse, Nate Gray is made of genetic materials from Cyclops and Jean Grey. He was created to be the ultimate telepath, and I think it kind of worked. He was made as a power bid to go against Apocalypse as well, and he's classified as an Omega level mutant, the most powerful psionic in any reality. Not just that one, and he's near omnipotent. So he's basically a living god. Neat. Just a fraction of power was enough to overload Omega and Mimic in Dark X-Men issue 2. Sentry and Nate Gray both fought Galactus in Dark X-Men issue 3, so it's fair to throw him on this list, I'd say. Number 3, Selene. AKA Black Priestess, Selene made her first debut in New Mutants issue 9. She was born 17,000 years ago, give or take, right after the Ocean's, ate Atlantis. She was an enemy of the sorcerer Kulan Gath in Uncanny X-Men 191, and her powers are pretty spectacular, and also terrifying. She can drain the life force out of you in order to live longer. All she has to do is come into physical contact, and you're toast, mister. No fist bumping Selene in this house. Her tribe realized she was powerful right from the get-go, way back when humankind was just starting to evolve, really. So her tribe's elders all sacrificed their lives to make her more powerful and everlasting. That's a solid tribe, ride or die right there. They obviously chose die, but still, they're riding a little bit. The character Selene from the Underworld series, funny enough, was actually based off of this Selene from the comics, and I can totally see Kate Beckinsale now every time I see her, and so will you. Number 2, Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17, he was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was born with gray skin and had blue lines all over his face. He looked different, so he was abandoned by his tribe. He was raised with the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive. So Apocalypse was killed by agents of Ozymandias, but was later revived thanks to his mutant abilities. Where to even begin with his Omega level mutant's abilities? I mean, self-molecular manipulation allows for him to alter his physical form for starters. He's also a genius. Even before being modified by the celestial ship, Apocalypse was already living for thousands of years. All he has to do is drift into a gentle coma. Number 1 trick to getting your beauty sleep. A coma, that ought to do it. X-Men Age of Apocalypse from 1995, we see just how big and bad this guy can get. Oscar Isaac also had a swing at him in X-Men Apocalypse on the big screen, and I thought he was pretty scary, but when he gets big, it's just nightmare fuel. Check it out. And finally, number 1, Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created by the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. What a combo! So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in turn, Magneto ripped the adamantium from Wolverine's bones, which I gotta say, I thought hangnails were bad. This sounds way worse. His healing factor had to work overtime, and Xavier was beyond upset, so he shut down Magneto's mind. He just made him completely catatonic. But during this moment, all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' consciousness, creating this new personality, Onslaught. Onslaught is pretty OP. He has the ability to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane, where he can then manipulate matter and energy. Telepathy, telekinesis, electromagnetic manipulation, just a combo you don't want to face in any way.
Number 10 is Spike. I talked about Marrow in part 8, so it's only fair that I talk about the animated X-Men Evolution character known as Spike. Spike, or Evan Daniels, was actually the nephew of Aurora Monroe, but his mutant powers are much different than hers. Similar to Marrow, Evan can manipulate his bones, causing it to project through his skin to create armor and bone spikes that he can use as melee weapons, or he can even launch the spikes spikes from his body as projectiles. Unlike Marrow though, Spike's bones piercing through his skin and being broken off, or fired as projectiles, doesn't actually hurt him, which is a huge benefit. What's super interesting though is that after some time with the Morlocks, Spike was able to make his bone spikes so hot they were almost on fire, which actually kind of raises more questions that go unanswered than anything else. In at number 9 is Avalanche. You don't often get Greek mutants, which makes Dominic Petros a pretty unique character already. Dominic came from the Greek island of Crete, which is somewhere I desperately want to travel to, so if someone can like hook me up with that, that'd be great, thanks. Like a lot of mutants though, he started out as a villain. Originally part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, then X-Corps, Project Wide Awake, Freedom Force, and Villains for Hire. He's gotten around, and with the destructive capabilities of his powers, it honestly kinda makes sense. Avalanche can create super powerful vibration waves from his hands. These waves can cause matter to shatter or crumble, and if he uses it on the earth or even large buildings, he can basically create earthquakes or, wait for it, avalanches. But Avalanche has quite the control over this ability, able to move objects, create tidal waves, cause the ground to move or shatter, or even ride waves of earth as transportation. And he even used his abilities to be a fantastic landscaper. If you guys are enjoying this content, I beg of you, slap that thumbs up button. It's the only thing you can do to prove you're loyal to me. I mean, to show your support. Number 8, the Blob. The Blob, or Frederick Dukes, is one of those characters I really didn't give enough credit to when I was growing up. He can actually do some pretty cool things, and some things that didn't even occur to me. His actual main mutant ability, for example, is that he can essentially become immovable by creating a monodirectional increase of gravity beneath him that extends out about 5 feet in radius from his center of balance. But what's even cooler is that with some training, Blob was able to manipulate his gravitational aura outwards in order to trigger a localized implosion. Also, the Blob is incredibly durable. The fat on the Blob is able to absorb the impact of rifle bullets, cannonballs, bazookas, and even torpedoes. He has even been able to survive being hit by a meteorite that was 50 feet in diameter moving at terminal velocity, which is insane. But that's not all. Blob is also able to manipulate his body, basically shapeshifting to a degree. After undergoing the Mother Vine enhancement process, Blob even developed a secondary mutation, liquid form. And here I thought he was just incredibly fat. Number 7, Caliban. If you have seen Logan, then you'll recognize Caliban as the bald, seemingly albino mutant who hangs out with Logan and Professor X. In that movie, he displays Caliban's main ability, which is being able to detect mutants' X genes, usually within about a 25-mile radius. Although, it's worth noting he has been able to detect particularly powerful mutants from further away before. But what I want to talk about is Caliban's other power that most people don't know. It's called his flight or fight response. So whenever Caliban feels stressed, he manifests 2 extra powers: super strength that can overpower Spider-Woman, and fear absorption. This second power allowed Caliban to absorb the psionic energy created in the fear from others and amplify it back into his environment, doing things like very quickly turning those nearby into a fear-induced panicking mob. This ability was boosted by Apocalypse twice when Caliban served him as both death and pestilence. Number 6, Frenzy. Joanna Cargill, like a lot of the X-Men, started off as a villain. She ran away from her home after her mutant powers activated, and she caused the passing of her not-so-great dad in self-defense. From there, she would join Apocalypse's Alliance of Evil, where she would do battle with the X-Men. She would go on to join the Acolytes and eventually the X-Men too. Now, she works as an agent of S.W.O.R.D. on Abigail Brand's X-Men Red Team. So, with a history like that, she has got to have some cool powers. Well, Frenzy's main power is invulnerability. She possesses steel-hard skin, which has only ever been penetrated by adamantium. She's also highly resistant to extreme hot and cold, as well as radiation, and she can withstand high impact forces like Cyclops' optic beam or a punch from She-Hulk. Speaking of She-Hulk, a byproduct of Frenzy's power is that she has super strength as well, enough to lift around 25 to 75 tons and punch Jennifer Walters back if she wants to.
Number 5, Storm. Aurora Monroe made her debut in giant-sized X-Men issue 1. She was recruited by Charles and joined the team to save other original students from Krakoa. Now, she was appointed leader after several years of hard work, and Storm has been referred to as a witch before because her powers to control the air and the elements, all that jazz. I mean, fair, she's kind of witch-like. Now, things go up a notch in X-Men issue 135 during the Dark Phoenix saga. Sebastian Shaw calls her a weather witch. Adds the word weather before, okay, it's a bit specific. See, it's not just storms and Earth that Aurora can control, even in space she can summon natural energy. Doesn't matter where you are, she'll find you. Number 4, Mr. M. Mr. M first appeared in District X issue 2. His powers came to be after an accident, like most of them. See, he accidentally turned a boy bullying his cousin inside out, and then he was stuck like that for 3 hours. That's the worst thing I can think of, I think. He didn't have lots of friends, I mean, obviously. The only ones close to him was Hannah Levy, who was not an Omega level mutant per se, but she did eat bugs. After M Day, Mr. M himself was one of the few who kept his powers. Now those Omega level powers being, well, I mean, this guy can literally do it all. He can control machines, resurrect the dead, phase through objects, manipulate matter, telekinesis, telepathy, and much, much more. Number 3, Proteus. Kevin McTaggart is of course related to Moira McTaggart, as you could have guessed right then. Now he's the son of her and her husband Joseph. Now their marriage was awful. Joseph was a total piece of shit. He was abusive physically and mentally, so Moira got out of there. She didn't even tell Joseph that she was pregnant, and to be honest, that's probably for the best. Guy's the worst. So young Kevin and Moira lived together at her mutant research center off the coast of Scotland. Now Kevin, as he got older, manifested abilities, which basically was this uncontrollable need for power. See, he craved it, his body needed it, so Moira had to hide him. She kept him locked in a cell for years, only referred to as Mutant X, because she wanted to keep him safe, and also others, you know? So one day while Magneto was fighting the X-Men, his cell was damaged and he got out. Now since the isosteric energy in his cell was no longer holding him back, Kevin defeated Polaris, he defeated Multiple Man, and even escaped the Phoenix. He survived the Phoenix, that's crazy. Now his body was starting to burn out like Moira tried to prevent all this time. So the only solution here was that he had to possess another human host, and then another one after that, and so on and danforth. Now he renames himself Proteus, with his imagination being the only thing that limits his powers. He's made of psionic energy, and he too can warp reality. Every time he possesses a new host, he gets stronger and stronger until eventually the host burns out and then he has to possess another poor soul. What a horrible, vicious cycle. Number 2, Franklin Richards. I was the impossible boy who could dream the future. I was a god, born to be with the mutants, but also born into the Fantastic Four, which means I have twice as many enemies. Damn, you could say that again, Franklin. He was born in New York City. Franklin Richards is the son, of course, of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, and he is quoted from Galactus himself as the most powerful mutant ever. That is quite, put that on a resume, that sounds great. He's a mutant beyond Omega power, in fact. See, Franklin was a member of Gen X, and he's also a future X-Men member in the Ultimate X-Men comics. Now, some of his powers include vast reality warping, psionic powers, he has control over the universe, so that's cool, must be nice. Precognitive powers are also helpful even when he's dreaming. His dreams will tip him off on the future and what's going to happen in them. Now, the only dreams I have are the ones where my teeth are falling out, or I can't run and my legs are made of rubber or something like that, you know? It's not as fun. He can resurrect the dead, he can time travel, he can teleport, astral project, and he can duplicate planets and or people. So if your eyebrows aren't raised yet, that's fine, I can continue. At a young age, he was able to create a pocket universe. And in Fantastic Four issue number 604, this kid took not only 1, but 3 Celestials. One of them, he laid them out with just 1 punch. So impressive. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. Of course, we have to end on Jean Grey. She is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in space with the Fantastic Four. It was drawn to her natural power. See, Xavier himself felt like he had to hide her true powers from her when she was just a child. He locked some of her abilities away in her mind. So the Phoenix Force was like, I smell something, what is that? What's hiding somewhere? So this dark cosmic force started to change her, and she didn't just get more powerful, she ended up becoming, well, low-key, she kind of became a villain. She ended up destroying an entire solar system that killed like, I don't know, billions of people, and then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was actually revealed that it wasn't the Jean Grey that had died, just the Phoenix as a separate entity, which is That's better. That's definitely better. Number 10, Brian Morrison. You know, the drummer from that one band? I don't know, he sounds like a drummer. We'll start with a recent addition to Marvel Comics. Brian Morrison made his first debut in X-Men Gold Volume 2, issue 36. He was a pretty average kid until, you know, he wasn't all of a sudden. He entered this frantic state and then he was this living embodiment of power. He looked like he was made of lava almost. It was a scary situation. Buildings, roads, people, animals, all destroyed. Just do not get in his way. Now, Cerebro obviously caught this action, and then when the X-Men arrived, Kitty tried to reason with the New Mutant, and it worked for a little bit. He calmed down, he went back to human mode, and then he was asked to come to Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Outreach, you know, to sharpen up on these new intimidating powers. But an angry townsfolk was still heartbroken over the damage caused beforehand, and then put a bullet in his head. That was a soft-sounding gun. A bullet into his head. Now at first the doctors actually didn't want to operate. Because of his powers, they didn't want to administer any anesthesia, and then he'd go all God mode and destroy everyone. Fair. But luckily Dr. Kozaneski agreed to perform surgery on the mutant. They changed their mind about how they felt about mutants. It was a nice moment. So not only did he survive, but he also joined the team right after that. We're off to a good start on this list, I'd say, yeah. Number 9, Exodus. Described as one of the most powerful mutants alive, Exodus is an Omega level telekinetic, and he can lift around 100 tons of weight, all telekinetically, like I just said. He was born in the 12th century and he made his first appearance in X Factor 92, and from birth, Bennett felt different. Like he had this power deep within him, something was there, but he wasn't quite sure what it was. Now at this time, he was an adult, he was a crusader who was best friends with the Black Knight of that era, Eobard Garrington. But then when he finally arrived to the Tower of Power all alone, he was exhausted. He had traveled far and wide to get there, and then when he arrived he heard a voice, and it spoke to him, asking if he was willing to risk everything to become powerful. And he's like, yes. Whoever that is, yes, definitely, yes. Then his powers manifested. So now in X-Men Legacy, he brought Professor X back from the dead, and then in New X-Men Volume 2, issue 46, he regenerated damaged organs, which honestly, not bad for a guy who's now immortal as well. And before we continue on with this list, we want to ask you guys to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. I mean, if you're still with us now, odds are you're liking it enough, so just give it a little tap, and then we'll get right back into this list. Easy peasy. Number 8, Strife. Making his debut in New Mutants issue 87, Strife was the clone of Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. So he's a clone of Cable from the future, and he has this bad armor. He's a telepathic and telekinetic mutant, and unlike Cable, who has to devote his psionic powers to ensure this techno-organic virus doesn't get his right side as well, Strife doesn't need to worry about all that jazz. And obviously Apocalypse wanted this child. He wanted to raise the clone himself so that down the road he could one day claim the body as his own. Not a bad idea. Apocalypse named him Strife, and of course he had evil running through every lesson that he taught him. Number 7, Matthew Malloy. While some mutants seek out the hashtag Omega lifestyle, others just want an ordinary lifestyle. Not everybody wants superpowers, especially Matthew Malloy, that's for sure. I mean, his name alone, he doesn't have like a cool evil alias, he's just Matthew. Hey, it's Matthew. Old Eminem, Matthew Malloy. He appears for the first time in Uncanny X-Men Volume 3, issue 23, and he doesn't last long. Spoilers, sad spoilers. But it's a good reason, kind of, not really. One day in Charleston, South Carolina, Matt and his wife Jules were having an argument. It was a little bit heated, and then all of a sudden she vaporized. Yeah, the Skrulls have great timing, I guess. And that of course traumatized him, and then a year later when he finally saw Jules' sister, his late wife's sister Alana, well, more bad stuff happened. He got so upset when he saw her and he started to remember all these things that his powers manifested, and he released this explosion of energy. Heartbroken energy. Alana's life was taken this time as well, so it's just getting worse and worse. His powers were uncontrollable. Multiple X-Men were biting the bullet after trying to stop this guy. So Tempest thought, you know what, let's just go back in time, and with the help of Professor X, also from the past, we can make sure Matthew's parents never meet and then never have him. Fair, good point. And the way Charles does it too is so casual. He's like, all right, ready? We're good. Let's go home. Number 6, Mastermind. Jason Wingard made his first appearance in X-Men issue 4. Now, he started off as a carnival mentalist, but was soon recruited into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from Magneto himself. He was needed for a very specific job. See, Jason, well rather Mastermind, was hired to use his illusionary powers to change Lorna Dane's memories so that she doesn't know that she's Magneto's daughter. Instead, she was made to believe that her parents had actually passed in a plane crash when she was just a wee child. Mastermind's power was also a necessity when it comes to taking over the country of Santo Marco. Mastermind was tasked to create an illusory army, and then he smiled as Magneto took over. He was like his little sidekick, little magician sidekick. He was like David Blaine, but like, evil and a sidekick. Once Mastermind cast an illusion of Cyclops to surprise Magneto, great prank, awesome, but Magneto ended up using a magnetic blast back, and then Scarlet Witch was the only real one in the way. It's just a prank, dude, just a prank, relax.
Number 5, Tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability. Like, how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So
Number 4, Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is a creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3, Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kind of leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and like no answers.
Number 2, Ice Cream. Ice Cream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Ice Cream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Ice Cream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kind of succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Ice Cream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? I have to know.
Number 1. El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Hope Summers. Making her first debut in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 205, Hope Summers is the first mutant born post-M-Day. She was born in Alaska and Cerebro just went off the charts. It went nuts. So the Purifiers immediately attacked. They were tipped off by a time-traveling Sentinel, Nimrod. So Cable came in at the same time and eventually saved her, but as for everybody else in that town, well, they didn't get so lucky. Cable saw the child as a messiah, the savior for mutants and humankind, but Bishop and the Purifiers were on a different page. They believed she would become a full-on supervillain. They thought the death toll would be 1 million after just 6 minutes. That's like, you can make rice in 6 minutes and then 1 million people are dead. That's bad news. That's bad news. And then after that, it would obviously only get worse, according to Bishop and his future knowledge. So the future clock was ticking. Hope learned how to fight by studying Cable, and the Strain 88 virus that recharged Rogue's power would kill anybody with just one touch. It was so much that Rogue fell into a coma. But when Hope was taken from Mystique, she was pressed against Rogue's face, and not only did she survive, but she also healed Rogue at the same time. Just like Jean Grey, Hope too was attracting the Phoenix Force, so when the Avengers came along offering to protect the child later on, that just led into Avengers vs. X-Men. So yeah, she's a little important, we can say that. Number 9, Brother Nathan. Brother, here we go. Making his first debut in Cable and Deadpool issue 16, Nathan Summers from Earth 58161 found peace. We'd love to see it. Now at this point, humans were done relying on television and all that crap. Instead, they used their imagination to explore and expand the humankind. How lovely is that? Wonderful. What a future. So our 616 Deadpool came along looking for the missing Cable, and that's where he ended up. He ended up here. Cable, or in this time, Brother Nathan that is, found Wade telekinetically and gave him the rundown. This pitch, this new peaceful environment that he created wasn't actually boring like Wade believed. And only 3 minutes later, Wade was gone. He got out of there. He couldn't do it. Only Cannonball and Siren from this Earth followed him back through dimensions, so he ended up getting in trouble by this quick visit. Brother Nathan is cool though. He's a cool dude. There's a ban on weapons in this timeline, but Nathan had this cool looking spear with a ceremonial blue tassel under the blade. It wasn't for combat, but more for keepsake purposes. And look at him. He looks like a nice dude. He kind of looks like the Lord, dare I say. Also, this world is beautiful. It feels like No Man's Sky meets Wakanda. That's a nice place to be. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be so great. It's so helpful here at the channel. You guys are the best. Now let's get right back into this awesome part 3. Let's do it. Number 8, White Sword. Among the many mutants residing on Okara, one was known simply as White Sword, or White Sword of the Ivory Spire, which rolls off the tongue a little nicer. He made his first appearance in X-Men Volume 5, Issue 12 during the 10 of Swords storyline. The White Sword and his army of 100 champions were sent to Ament. They battled and bought the mutants some time. So when the dust was settled, White Sword vanished. He never returned with his people again, and after the mutants were trapped in Ament, they saw all these demons who had been crucified, so they knew that the White Sword was there, just kicking all along. Now he was an ally to the mutants of Okara, but after that many years of endless war and resurrection, he eventually started to lose his mind, as one would. He would start attacking his friends as well as enemies. He just couldn't see the difference. I mean, as if living 1,000 years wasn't bad enough, imagine having to spend it constantly fighting for your life. But he is quite good at fighting. He's a master at sword combat, and if he does decide to heal you after a battle, you'll then be enlisted to his army by default. Nice. Number 7, Zorn. Jean Grey, this time from Earth 13729. This Jean first appeared in X-Men Battle of the Atom issue 1. Zorn, well rather Professor Zorn that is, was a teacher at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, and this is the past Jean grown up, right? That's important to say. Battle of the Atom was a crossover event where the future X-Men traveled back to the original 5. But they weren't exactly X-Men though. They were future Brotherhood of Mutant members, led by Charles Xavier II and Reyes, those two villain kids. So Jean Grey went by Zorn and rocked the skull helmet. It was a vibe, it was a pretty good look. The team wanted to force the OG back to the past and prevent their future. Now this version of Jean didn't have the Phoenix Force attached to her, but she was still able to take on Emma Frost. She was quite powerful. The dialogue alone is pretty great here. Jean is asking Jean what happens in the future. That makes her such a what a way to put it, right to the punch. Now this version of Jean can't go more than a few minutes without Zorn's containment helmet, and she has similar powers as our other Jean that we know, only they grow in strength this time around. It's trouble. Number 6, James Braddock Jr. First appearing in Captain Britain issue 9, Jamie Braddock Jr., the oldest son, of course, from Dr. James and Lady Elizabeth Braddock. And when I say oldest, he's 10 years older than his siblings, the twins Betsy and Brian Braddock. Now Jamie can manipulate reality, but it never started that way. He was brilliant when it came to finances, and if that's to buy the books for you and not cool enough, he was also a pro race car driver. Nice. He found out about his brother's secret identity, and then he helped out here and there as a supporting character to his comic run. But Jamie started to get behind on bills, so he resorted to crime. First starting with minor crimes, and then as these debts grew, he had to get really dark and grimy with his actions. Eventually, Dr. Crocodile kidnapped him, told Brian about his brother's crime work, and his brother kind of just let him go, right? Doc Croc was evil. After these experiments, Jamie was convinced that this reality that he lives in is actually just a dream, and his mind was just breaking. It was sad stuff. This just happened to be the tipping point for Jamie to meet his mutant power, which also happened to be the ability to warp and restructure reality in his immediate vicinity. Terrible, powerful combo right there. Troublesome. He views the world as invisible strings that he plucks away at. It's like Interstellar style. Murph.
Number 5, Dragoness. For Tamara Kurtz, she was born a mutant directly because of the nuclear fallout caused by Hiroshima that her parents were exposed to, which is a different reason than a lot of other mutants, which to me makes her more interesting. She only debuted in 1990, so she's only been around for about 30 years, but she has certainly established herself as a powerful mutant so far, displaying the ability of bioelectricity generation, kind of like an eel. No, I'm just kidding. She's not like an eel. She usually uses this electricity in electrical blasts and pyrotechnic flares, which she used as part of Stripe's Mutant Liberation Front. Since her introduction, she has also been seen as a vampire, after which she died and has since been revived, so she may or may not still be a vampire as well. I have no idea. Also, for a while she was equipped with these biotechnic pair of wings, which in the House of M were actually completely organic. I'd be stoked to see her show up again in comics and maybe expanded upon. I don't feel like there are many electricity-based mutants, so it'd be kinda cool. Number 4, Slab. A lot of you liked seeing Thumbelina in part 7 of this list, but what about her brother? Chris Anderson was a member of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys, and his life before this time isn't very well known. He has abilities similar to his sister. Where she can decrease in size, Slab has been shown to increase in size, getting stronger and more durable as he does so. Later on, he joined the Mutant Liberation Front, and even more recently than that, he has been seen on the Mutant Nation of Krakoa, where he went on to join up with Sword as part of their security division. Number 3, Vincente. He isn't really the most impressive of characters, although his abilities are certainly interesting, even if he usually gets defeated. On Earth 616, Vincente was a member of M-Plate's Hellions team. He had the ability to change his body from solid, liquid, or gas forms. Now as a gas or liquid, he has been shown to be able to mix himself in with other materials and substances. So, for example, he once mixed himself in with some soup. Or, in the Age of Apocalypse world, he became wine inside a bottle. Over time, he further developed his abilities so that in his gas form, he could now render himself poisonous if inhaled. He was defeated twice, and since the last defeat, he hasn't really appeared more. Not yet at least, so let's cross our fingers and hope he shows up. Number 2, Skids. Sally Blevins, otherwise known as Skids, has a long history in Marvel Comics, being involved with many other mutant characters and teams from Magneto and Charles Xavier to the Morlocks and Terminators. First introduced in X-Factor number 7 in August 1986, Skid's mutant ability is to create frictionless force fields that protect her from pretty much all physical attacks, falls, energy weapons, and projections. It can also allow her to kind of skate at a bit of speed given the frictionless nature of these force fields. She can also use her force fields to extend to others if she focuses. There was one really cool moment when she protected Avalon from breaking up upon re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere with help from Jean Grey. That was really cool. So if you ever check that out, check it out. That made no sense. Whatever. Let's move on. Number 1, Wind Dancer. Sophia Mantiga was increasingly isolated at a young age, being ignored by her father, Walter Barrett. after the death of her mother and being told to not use her powers. Now Sophia finally reached a breaking point. She entered into one of her father's grocery stores and let loose a hurricane inside of it. After she was arrested by police, Mr. Barrett was confronted by Danielle Moonstar, who saw Sophia on the news. She persuaded him to enroll Sophia into the Xavier Institute. Sophia Mantiga has aerokinesis that she uses to amplify small vibrations in the air and draw far-off sounds to her ears. She can also disrupt the equilibrium of others with compressed air, lift herself off the ground for flight, create sharp forces of wind that can cut through material, and she even creates isolated whirlwinds or direct blasts of high-pressure air control. And she can manipulate the movement of air. But this is all before she was depowered. She has been a part of the Marauders, X Corporation, New Warriors, and New Mutant Squad.
Number 10, Iceman. Bobby Drake made his first X-Men debut in X-Men issue 1. Now his powers are pretty obvious. I mean, even his name alone should tip you off. He can lower his external and internal body temperature because there are nerves that regulate body temperature and they're found in a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. See, Bobby can override this nerve drastically. His mutation allows him to withstand sub-zero temperatures and turn into ice within seconds. He can fully control ice, snow, probably snow cones, realistically. He can freeze the moisture in the air just like Frozone and create anything that he imagines. He can also create cold clones of himself on a molecular level, so you won't even see him coming, but you'll definitely feel it. Number 9, Elixir. Josh Foley made his comic book debut in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 5. Now he was detected by Cerebro, and his Omega power is actually quite helpful in this case. See, he obtains an Omega class healing ability, and around M-Day he was actually considered a general threat, weirdly enough. See, Elixir is able to control the biological structure of his and others' bodies. I mean, down to the genetic level. He can produce biomolecular energy whenever he chooses, affecting any matter that he chooses to come into contact with. So if he uses his powers too much, he'll pass out and just remain in a coma. It takes a toll on him. His DNA reboots itself, which is pretty impressive. I mean, I get a bruise and it hangs out for like an entire week. What's going on there? He was able to regrow Prodigy's heart in New X-Men Volume 2, Issue 39, and he cured X-23 of the legacy virus, and Josh himself says that he can cure Sabretooth from the inversion effect. What a combo. This guy can also bring people back from the dead. You can't really beat that. Number 8, Legion. David Haller made his comic debut in New Mutants issue 26. He was a child of Xavier and Gabrielle Haller, who later became the Israel ambassador to the United Kingdom. So the parents, I mean, there's a lot of pressure there already. See, he was kind of an accident. It happens. The pair had an affair decades back, but Charles was unaware that she was pregnant when he left her. Now the child was of course born a mutant with telepathic and telekinetic abilities, but he also had the ability to cause destruction with just his mind. The old Charles gene coming into play. Scott Summers describes David as Omega level, and the reason he's named Legion, well, it comes from the biblical demon Legion, where a man was possessed by many evil spirits, because David has 3 different personalities. All the powers with all the personalities. That's a scary, you don't want that. You don't want to run into him. Number 7, Kid Omega. I mean, yeah, Omega is literally in his name, so we have to include Kid Omega. Meet Quintavious Quire. He made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths next to Jean Grey, who may or may not be on this list later on. I'll never tell. But he was once a host of the Phoenix Force as well. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang. He wasn't always a bad kid. It's just, you see, what happened was on his birthday, when he was still young, he received a call from his parents to say that, oh, you're adopted. Happy birthday. Awesome. And these kids are the hardest gang in town. They handle humans the way that they want, with violence, cool haircuts, and monologues, of course. Now he's been described as Omega level telepath and telekinetic and scion. Not bad for a kid. Number 6, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, so you already know that we're But Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. See, he was born after Cyclops and after Havoc. Well, not really born, he was surgically removed from his mother's body and then placed in an incubator accelerator, aged to be at his prime, and then sent to Earth to work for Devon Shikari, so a little bit different than the other guys. He escaped and was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from, which is always good. But as a student, he was impressing Charles a lot, and all he wanted to do really was learn his abilities so he can help others. You can't beat that, come on, the guy, he's got a good heart. Sounds like the dream student. Now he can psionically manipulate energy however he wants. He can manipulate other mutant powers, And that's the scary part with Vulcan. He suppresses all of your superpowers. Emma Frost, Rachel Gray, and Xavier have all confirmed that after the events of M-Day, this alpha level mutant absorbed energies from the depowered mutants and then became an omega level one himself.
Number 5, Typhoid Mary. Okay, so if you know who the Mutant Legion is, the one who has hundreds of different alternate personalities that all have different mutant powers, well, Mary Walker is sort of like that, only for Mary, she has only a handful of alternate personalities and they just allow her to access the powers that just Mary can't access. Those powers include limited amounts of pyrokinesis, telekinesis to move small objects, grabbing her dropped weapons or even turning objects into armor, and telepathy, usually used to manipulate others or influence people to do things without thinking, like kissing her or grabbing their weapons. Her Mary persona is a pretty quiet and timid person with no actual powers, but her other main persona is Typhoid, who is more adventurous, lustful, and violent. She later adopted a few other personas like Bloody Mary, who was sadistic and brutal and pretty much hated all men. Kind of understandable, sort of. And Mutant Zero, who was a cold, calculated, and militaristic person. Number 4, Mask. The Morlock leader, Mask, has a pretty ironic ability. He himself is not exactly the most gorgeous of beings, but his abilities allow him to alter the appearances of others through touch, molding their bodies and features like clay, or just mentally influencing the change he desires. He can alter people's hair and skin color, body structure, and several other features, including turning limbs into tentacles. Mask can also use his powers in combat by making an enemy's limbs attached to their body, like that, or by closing their breathing orifices to limit their combat prowess. His powers of body manipulation later evolved so that he could alter his own flesh, but the new limits of his powers were stated to be a secondary mutation by Charles Xavier. Apparently, when Mask's body was pierced by Shatterstar's sword, Mask instinctively altered his own internal organs to help him survive, and ever since, he's been able to modify his own body. But what he can do exactly in terms of modifying his own body hasn't really been told yet, so we don't really know. Number 3, Christine Cord. Although Christine Cord, now going by Longstrike, doesn't actually have any mutant powers anymore after M-Day, she used to actually go by the name Tattoo, because her mutant ability was a chameleon skin that allowed Christine to form words or patterns on her skin which she could use to camouflage herself or convey messages. But she actually has a secondary ability in the form of biophasing. This basically meant that Christine was able to move through matter, and if she reached into another person, which is a terrifying thought, she could disrupt the neurochemistry of a person and or alter their molecular composition. Unfortunately, we won't know what else she could have possibly done because after losing her abilities and joining the New Warriors, she unfortunately did not live for too much longer. And at number 2 is Jeb Lee. Jeb Lee is one of the final horsemen of the mutant Apocalypse. He was chosen as Famine after Apocalypse watched Jeb using his drums at Gettysburg during the Civil War. Now, using his drums made Apocalypse choose Jeb as a horseman? Yes, it did, because Jeb has an incredibly unique mutant ability, which is to transmit a bio-auditory cancer that feeds on the flesh of all who can hear it whenever he makes a tapping noise, whether that be with his drums or even just tapping his fingers on a table. Jeb has a pretty, dark past, as you can probably imagine. Lee was a Confederate spy during the United States Civil War, walking the battlefields dressed as a Union soldier. Now, after returning back home, his Union Army uniform was discovered and his family was burned alive, which manifested his mutant powers. He then used these powers to go back to war, marching from battle to battle and taking the life of every human in his trail. And at number 1 is Daken. Daken, or Akihiro, possesses a lot of the same abilities as his father, Wolverine. He has a crazy healing factor, superhuman senses, and of course, bone claws. But what some people may not be aware of is the one mutation he possesses that neither his father nor his sisters possess. That power would be pheromone control. Daken has empathic pherokinetic abilities that allow him to use his pheromones to manipulate the emotional state and sensory perceptions of others. He has used this to instill intense fear, happiness, depression, fascination, and a false sense of security in others. The false sense of security, though, is the definitely most interesting one, as it has allowed him to sneak up on others without them even worrying that he could be there, which is so cool. He has also used this ability to alter others' depth perception and vision, making them fight sluggishly. He can also control his own pheromones to make him basically untrackable, even to someone like Wolverine. Now there are limits to Dakin's pherokinesis, but it is such a cool ability.
Number 10, Luktuka the Knower. Luktuka is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Luktuka in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arakko who sit on the Great Ring, Luktuka resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool! Luktuka's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, you know, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone like you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, no, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Luktuka's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just like teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9, Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, "Hello, you don't have to do this. You know, I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself." The dude operating the mech understands him since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8, Manifold. If you thought Luktuka was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Luktuka being newer, you may already know of Manifold, because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kind of confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vessi's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking.
Number 7, Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics, and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Arakko, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes it also force her to always win, like against her will. And then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, on the cusp of the afterlife due to his hunger, his mutant powers activated. This gave him super strength and durability, alongside an extremely bestial form, similar to like a minotaur, but almost as if it was made of stone. He's really super cool looking, honestly. But his more powerful ability would be empathic war infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he just went boom. He became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. Number 4. Warpath. James Proudstar is the younger brother of John Proudstar, also known as Thunderbird. And he always idolized his brother, but in that idolization he actually limited his own powers to a degree. Mostly, his mutation boosts up his physical capabilities, granting him super strength that has had various different levels, once having Hulk levels of strength, but another time struggling to fight an alligator. He can run at 100 miles per hour, and his stamina allows him to exert himself for 24 hours without rest. He can withstand a hell of a lot more than a regular human, like falling several stories or being hit with energy blasts. His agility and reflexes are increased to the point of dodging bullets, and his senses allow him to see in the dark and hear sounds other humans can't. After some training with Pete Wisdom, Warpath has shown the ability of self-propelled flight and a regenerative healing factor. What's really interesting is that while working with Ghost Rider, James gained shamanistic abilities like perceiving spirit energy. He's also probably one of the best mutant combatants, whether it's unarmed or armed with his vibranium daggers. Number 3. Gideon. I believe Gideon here is the first external to make this list. The externals include immortal mutants like Selene and Apocalypse, but they all share a psychic link which separates them from other immortal characters. Gideon was born during the 15th century, and aboard Christopher Columbus's first expedition, he actually succumbed to scurvy, and his life was changed forever when he resurrected and gained his mutant abilities. Like all externals, Gideon is immortal and no longer ages. He can also resurrect himself, as confusing as that sounds since he's immortal, but unique to him is the ability of power mimicry, giving himself the powers, advanced skills, and talents of any being, android, or even battlesuit, and he's been able to gain the powers of 3 people at once. But more than that, his powers allow him to fully understand how to use that other person's powers to the point that he can even overcome the original user of said power. Number 2. Cypher. Cypher, or Doug Ramsey, has omnilingual translation abilities, and considering that communication is an essential part of our everyday lives, whether that be with other humans, devices, or even our own selves, I'd say he's pretty powerful. He can translate language of literally any origin, even alien. He can read and decipher codes, including computer code, as well as read body language, subtext, and unspoken intention. More recently, everything he sees is interpreted as information, meaning he basically kind of just reads life. He can read body language to the extent he's able to predict people's moves before they make them. He can learn and perform spells for magic users, and he even created his own overly complex language that makes him immune to psychic mind reading. But Doug actually merged with Warlock, essentially giving Doug techno-organic shapeshifting abilities on top of everything else. And for our number 1 spot, we are going to talk about my number 1 favorite X-Men, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner was first introduced in Giant Size X-Men number 1 in April 1975, with the mutant ability to biophysically displace himself into the Brimstone dimension, travel through it with a subconscious sense, and then return back to our dimension in a different location, essentially teleporting. This all happens so fast it's almost instant, and it always is accompanied by the signature BAMF sound. Although he can teleport really far, even across the world more recently, he avoids teleporting to places he hasn't been before, or places he can't see, as he can accidentally end up appearing within solid matter, which could potentially end his life. Although he does have a small amount of spatial awareness that at least keeps his feet from teleporting into the ground, and he can even use the little demon things known as BAMFs as teleportation beacons that allow for teleportation to places he hasn't been before, even across dimensions. Through his unique physiology, he gains a few extra abilities as well, like a prehensile tail, microsuction hands and feet, and flexible bone structure, but he can also camouflage himself, bending light using the brimstone dimension. But what a few might not know is that he actually became immortal thanks to the fact that recently he sacrificed his soul in heaven to come back to life, which is good because I never want to lose this legendary blue mutant.